3, 4. String is a very, string is a very, string is a very, string is a very, string is a very.
We're at Snape Maltings in beautiful Suffolk, and we are running a training for musicians on behalf of Sing to Beat Parkinson's. Basically, Sing to Beat Parkinson's is an organisation that works with people living with Parkinson's, using singing as an intervention to make their lives better and increase the volume of their voices and give them the ability to keep using their voices and communicating. And also through the benefit of bringing people together with singing, there's the social benefits of getting out, being with their friends, talking about the condition, all those kind of things, and having a good cup of tea. But we're training other musicians to run those groups.
There is so much expertise in the organisation. The Sing to Beat Parkinson's Network and the Canterbury Cantata Trust, the practitioners who have started this work are so experienced but so generous in sharing that experience with us, and I think it's really good to be part of a community of people with the same aims and the same objectives and feel that belonging.
It's special to be here, but just sharing, you never stop learning. Whatever you do, however experienced you are, there's always something to learn, and I get a lot of pleasure from mixing with other practitioners and hearing their stories and picking up ideas and going away and trying them.
In any aspect of life, I mean, you can't be static in any way. So people want to change the society around us. So this is part of that change, and it's incremental, but it's happening, you know.
Oh, talking about Yoon. Yoon's here. So. Good morning, everyone. Lovely to see you all again on this lovely Saturday morning in lockdown 2, as I just mentioned. So today we are going to look a little bit more in detail about how we use what Trish has mentioned to you about the things that people with Parkinson's are affected by and how we use singing to help with that. But first of all, we thought we might just pop you into breakout rooms, because these big Zoom calls, it's nice to kind of meet people and say hello.
When COVID first struck, my initial reaction was that we were going to have to shut down all of our activities for the foreseeable future, particularly given the demographic of the people that use our services most, which is older people with chronic health conditions. So we were forced to adapt very quickly, and there was a sort of perfect storm, in a sense, of the rise of video conferencing software like Zoom and Teams, and the realization, I think, particularly from sort of older, more isolated people, that it was necessary to adopt the technology if they wanted to remain connected to organizations such as us and their friends. And then its subsequent ubiquity was such an important factor in our ability to continue to operate as a charity. We transferred core groups to Zoom within about a week of the first lockdown. This was a particularly steep learning curve for our practitioners, and it took some time to find an ideal model. To start with, the facilitators managed the whole process, letting people in and out of the room, monitoring what's going on in the chat rooms, putting people in breakout rooms. We devised a model whereby we would employ administrators and volunteers to run that process, so that the practitioners could focus on delivering the session.
So the first time I was on Zoom, I was very uncomfortable. I felt that I couldn't achieve the feedback that one would normally get through direct eye contact, or actually directing a question to somebody, or drawing somebody in who has a skill in that context. And that's because we didn't have the chat beforehand, all that sort of lovely coffee registration thing where you get to know people a little bit. So it just did feel very much more distanced, and it felt more transactional. I thought it was very interesting that it evolved into something that is much more interactive.
Also, having those instant channel to chat, it can be a bit too much, but I think people quite like putting out their ideas out there, or responses sort of immediately.
Because of that ability to write in the chat, you can gauge what the participants have done previously really quickly. because they're dropping things in. You can kind of go, oh, well, I've got this person's done lung health or training, or they've run a community choir, and you're able to adjust things which you can't necessarily do in the room. On one hand, you can't get to know them at all, but on the other hand, you can kind of get some insight, I think.
Literally, we can read the room because people do engage in that chat. You know, lots of links to things that people had asked about or more information, incredibly useful. I mean, in terms of the sort of follow-up service, gives it a sort of longer lifespan, if you like, than perhaps a session in a big hall.
Obviously, the thing about Zoom sessions that you probably all realise is that you can't all sing at the same time. In fact, we can test this, and I do like to test this. If I ask you all to unmute, this is just to prove, and you can do this with people. I'll play a little phrase, you do the kind of natural musical response. Clap the response, and we'll see how out of time we are with each other. There you go. That was kind of all right, yeah. Yeah, nearly.
You know, usually our training is 2 days, it's very intensive, it's one session right after another. And some people who did our online training, who've also done our offline training, commented that it was really useful to have quite long breaks between sessions. So we ran 2 hours on a Saturday and then 2 hours on a Sunday, and then the following weekend we do the other sessions. And people found it useful to have time to reflect on those different elements rather than having to go straight into the next topic.
You know, there's a lot of theoretical background understanding, underpinning of what we do that can be very well translated into over Zoom.
Theoretical elements, Zoom lends itself really well to that. There's less distraction, you know, you're kind of slightly tunnel vision, easier to make notes, less distractions from other people in your own environment.
They seem to work better, and people seem to be more engaged with it online. And I don't know whether that's because they could be researching at the same time as they were talking, you know, the ability to Google and do those little bits that you can sneakily do, which you can't do when you're sitting in a room. So I think in some ways that made that part of it more immediate and more engaging.
People enrolled who wouldn't necessarily have enrolled because of the challenge of, you know, domestic family life and getting away from home. So I did think that it opened up more opportunities in that sense.
Our raison d'etre, if you like, is to ensure that as many people have access to what we do as possible. We've in the past established international connections anyway, but never really considered that from the point of view of training. That made us realise that we could really expand and open up our reach. So we've made some interesting connections, and through those connections we might be able to get the word out in those territories. And that's certainly something that we're planning to do.
In terms of teaching materials or learning materials, Zoom seems to be also better because you can share the recordings quite easily.
It does give very much more opportunity to broaden the learning experience across the world.
I think Zoom is great because people can do it from all over the world. I think it's such a good introduction. What we've been doing, I think, is a really great intro. But I think people can't call themselves Sing to Beat practitioner afterwards, so we have to see them live. And I think that's when we do something different with them.
With Zoom, we can, meet people from around the world. But that's really great. But it does lack of that interaction, so we do need to meet in person as well.
We gain a huge amount out of building a sort of Sing to Beat family, and we do that through the face-to-face sessions at Snape. And that develops a sense of ownership and bonding and camaraderie and professionalism, which is difficult to achieve, I think, on Zoom. So my feeling is the ideal would be to have regional initial training courses where we all meet. And then a lot of follow-up could be done on Zoom.
I think it's a bit like, the Open University model used to be, that you did all your, coursework online, but then you had to go on a physically based engagement to actually put whatever you were learning about into practice.
If we could no longer be face-to-face, that would be sad. But I do think that we would continue to grow and develop a way of learning.
So the big takeaway for us from this whole experience has been that online training provides us with a greater and more dynamic interaction between our team and the trainees, certainly on the theoretical side in particular. But the platform provides us with the ability to reach more people and broaden our international connections. It gives us flexibility for people who cannot attend every session for whatever reason, because we can send them recordings of the sessions. But I think the biggest takeaway for us is that the demand is substantial, and this therefore provides us and other organisations like ours with a significant opportunity. So we think that there'll be a mixed model going forward of online and offline, and that our offline training in the real world will have a more demanding entry level, but at an introductory level, running sessions on Zoom or other similar platforms is a really effective way for us to share our knowledge.